espresso. You need that for any creative endeavour. Cheers. Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around I'm doing something a little bit different. I do movie podcasts, so I thought I would talk about how I podcast. I've been doing it since 2007, back in the dim, dark days of the previous decade. So I've come up with a kind of a method on how to do the podcast. Of all the people I know, there's only one other person who does a movie podcast by themselves. Everybody else gets 2 or 3 other people in. They all talk about the movie and the heavy lifting is shared. But me, I'm a one-man band.
The one-man band is coming.
I produce it, I edit it, I appear on the podcast. I do everything because basically I'm selfish and stupid. Having said that, it's a lot of fun. I've met a lot of friends doing it and I'm quite happy with the podcast, which is self-sustaining thanks to the lovely people who support the podcast and the YouTube channel via Patreon. So how do you do it? Well, first off, you've got to find movies to talk about. And you've got to find movies to talk about that you like. I tried talking about movies I didn't like, and that didn't work for me. It went tremendously badly. You come out sounding whiny if you do that. So you've got to find movies that you like, or that intrigue you in some ways, or that have something going for them. Now, I do 2 podcasts. The first and the oldest one from 2007 till right now is Paleocinema podcast. It's a movie podcast about movies that are more than 20 years old. So I talk about older films, I talk about them in historical contexts, talk about why I like them, I talk about the actors and the personal lives of the actors. Anything to do with those movies, I'm there and I'm doing them. Then when I did 100 episodes of Paleocinema podcast, I decided to start a second podcast because again I'm stupid. And that one, the Martian Drive-In podcast, is about genre films. Fantasy, horror, science fiction, and some TV thrown in there as well. So I've started that one about 2012 and it's been going ever since. So I do 2 podcasts, I alternate doing them each week and I enjoy doing them a lot. Occasionally I do get guests in, sometimes via Skype. So how do you find the movies? That's the big question. Now you've always got to be looking for them. It's a bit like when you're looking for books. Back in the days before Amazon took over the whole industry. You kind of know what you're liking, you know what's roughly the kind of stuff you're going to read, and then you go hunting around bookstores until you find them. It's the same with movies. I'll find them on download, I'll find them on Netflix or Stan or Hulu or Amazon. I'll find them in stores as well, and I'll find them by going into the back room where the enormous pile of DVDs and Blu-rays are. Basically the back room is taken up with movies. So that's the first part. Find a couple of movies, and usually I try to do a double feature because I like double features. I grew up watching double features in cinemas, so I love double features. So 2 movies, they don't have to be related to each other at all. I've kind of broken away from that because I was trying to do a theme for a long time, but just 2 movies I like. It doesn't matter that they've got nothing to do with each other. I've done serious dramas with comedies, I've done musicals with tragedies. It doesn't really matter. Do what you like. That's the first thing. And then we come to the next bit. Which is watching the movies. You've got to watch the movies. And you've got to have a notepad with you when you watch the movies. Something like this. Write down your notes. Just bullet point them. Don't worry about writing great detailed notes about things. Bullet point the stuff that intrigues you about the movie when you're doing it. Then you've got to hit the books after you've watched the movies. And I have a pretty extensive reference library now after spending my whole life collecting books. So references are great. Don't always believe Wikipedia or IMDb. If you've got another source, even at your local library, hit that. Doesn't matter what you're interested in as far as podcasting is concerned. If you've got a reference you can look up about that before you do the podcast, that's going to help. You're going to find something else which is important by looking at the movie, looking at IMDb, looking at Wikipedia, and looking at books. And that is the thing that really helps me do a podcast. That thing I call the hook. It's the one tiny bit of information, sometimes tiny, sometimes large, but that one bit of information that really sets what you're talking about apart from everything else. I mean, the hook can be anything. When I did Rebel Without a Cause, the hook was the personal lives of the actors. There's some interesting stuff with the director Nicholas Ray, Sal Mineo, the actor, James Dean, Natalie Wood. The hook was what happened behind the screen. I did a movie called Dead of Night, which was a portmanteau horror film from 1940s. And the hook on that one was Fred Hoyle, the famous astronomer, went to see that movie. And based on what he saw in that movie and the circular structure of the film, he developed a now outmoded theory of cosmology, theory of the whole universe called the steady state theory. So it's important to always have a hook. One, sometimes you get multiple hooks, sometimes you can have 4 or 5 hooks about a particular movie, but finding the hook is really, really important. The next thing is a hard part. The next thing is the bit that sometimes it works, sometimes if you're not feeling well it doesn't work as well, and that is sitting down and actually recording the podcast. I do it with a couple of things. I have a really fantastic microphone now, which is called a Rode NT USB. It runs you a couple of $100 to $300 depending on the exchange rates and where you live. But it's a really crisp mic. It does beautifully, lovely, wonderful audio, even when you have a voice like mine. So I've got that. It hooks directly into the USB port of the computer. I'll just cut to what my computer setup is now. See, not everybody on YouTube has really tidy and neat computer setups. I have a really messy one. I've got power boards across the desk. I've got little knickknacks everywhere. I've got a whole bunch of junk on the shelves above the desk. It's not that kind of teal light backlighting the monitor kind of deal with me. It's purely just how I live. I'm a messy person. My desk is always messy. The man cave, before I cleaned it up a few months ago, was piled with stuff so high I had to dodge between it, but now I've got it into a state where I can live with it. And the software I use 2 pieces of software to do the podcast. The first one's called Audacity. It's freeware and it's an audio recorder. It's the best one I've found that doesn't cost you a ridiculous amount of money. It does everything I need to do. It allows you to do things like when I speak too quickly, I can slow down the tempo of a particular piece of audio that I've done and actually stretch it out a little bit, which is really great. I love doing that when the audio doesn't work well. I also do that for the voiceovers I do for this channel. If I speak too fast and I think that people aren't going to understand what I say when I'm speaking that fast, I will go and stretch out the audio by about 20% and it becomes more comprehensible. So I definitely recommend using Audacity. It's free, it's on multiple platforms, and it works. Once I've got the audio done and I've done any editing I need to do on it, and I've popped in the audio clips from the movies that I use, under fair use of course, for the particular podcast movies I'm talking about, I then use a second piece of software called the Levelator. I save the file as a WAV file and drag and drop it into the Levelator. And what the Levelator does is it gets all the audio levels more or less even. So if I'm talking loudly in one bit and talking softly in another, if I suddenly say something with a bit of an abrupt start, it levels all that out so it sounds buttery smooth. You need that. There are so many people when they start podcasting where the levels are all over the place and the people listening to them are up and downing the levels on whatever device they're listening it to. And it becomes a pain in the ass, and you don't really need that in your life. You want a podcast with a pretty smooth level all the way across, or even a YouTube channel as well. So you need that kind of stuff just to make the listening experience a lot more comfortable. Then you need a place to host the files. Now I use Podbean. Now, there are a whole bunch of different places to host your audio files. They're all fairly much the same. Some of them are a little bit iffy. Some of them insist that if they're going to host it, they'll put their own ads into your podcast. That's not something I particularly want, so I don't use those. But Podbean runs me about $130 Australian a year to host each one of the 2 podcasts, and I can access them myself if I need to. They help you out too with linking for social media purposes, and they're pretty good. I haven't had really a problem with them at all. So there's that. You put it up there. Now here is the hard part about podcasting or doing YouTube or anything at all like that. It's an act of faith when you start. Unless you're a professional person, you're a comedian or somebody with some kind of media profile, doing a podcast, doing a YouTube channel, doing anything like that at all is an act of faith. You're putting it up on the cloud, you're putting it into the internet with the hope that an audience will find you. Yes, you can tweak things. You can tweak your hashtags to get more prominence on certain platforms. You can tell everybody on social media that you've done it, and you'll get a bit of an audience from that as well. But it's an act of faith. You've got to have a bit of faith in yourself, and you've got to be in there for the long haul as well. For the first year of my podcast, I got like 12 downloads per podcast. And then it started arcing upwards, and now I've got to a level that I'm happy with. I won't tell you what that is because it's small compared to some people and enormous compared to others, and I don't want to really get into a pissing competition about that. But I do know if you keep trying and you keep improving what you do, each and every time you do it, you're going to get an audience. And the size of that audience will vary, but you will get an audience, and you will get people who are grateful to you for putting information for them, putting entertainment out there, giving something pretty much for nothing, which will make their day just that little bit better. And that's what it's all about. And the other thing too is I know a fair bit about movies. I've been watching movies, as the little bit at the start of the podcast indicates, since 1962. I know a bit about film. And one of the things I've learned in the many, many decades I've been on this planet is there is absolutely no use knowing something unless you share that knowledge. It's totally useless to keep knowledge to yourself. If you're enthusiastic about a film and you know something about it and you say to people, hey, this movie is great, I think that you should absolutely watch this movie. It is really interesting. It may not be totally to your taste, but here are the things I found very interesting in that movie. Then people like that. There are so many people I've put onto movies that they now love. And there are so many people who've shared what they love with me and given me the knowledge of films that they like, which I would not have seen otherwise. And I've just bashed the shelf with my hand. So it's all about sharing knowledge and sharing love and sharing passion and information and sharing the things that you find really interesting. If you find yourself doing things about stuff because you think you should and you're not really that into it, find that something else to do. Because your enthusiasm, your passion, your love of certain things will show through in whichever medium, whether it's YouTube or podcasting, that you do it in. So if you feel like that's something you want to do, first off, commit to doing it long term. Don't just go, oh, I'll have a go at that and I'll do a few episodes and just see how it goes. You're not going to get the results you want by doing that. You've got to be in for the long haul, and you've got to be dedicated and passionate. And you've got to cut that space, that time and space out of your life to dedicate to those things. They will reward you, and there are times when I'm down, everybody gets down sometimes, but however down I get, I realize that people like what I do, and people see value in what I do. People get entertained by it, people get educated by it, people wait for the next episodes, and that's an incredibly rewarding thing for me. I love doing it. I love the passion people give back to me for my passion, and I really do like movies. So I just thought I'd do this little video about podcasting and about my philosophy of films. If you liked it, please click a like and a subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell, which helps out a bit. And I'm going to be back in about 7 days with something else entirely regarding movies. So in the meantime, take care of yourselves, watch some good films, watch some bad films. Watch movies that you're passionate about or that your friends are passionate about. Try not to watch Disney live action remakes because they're shit. But apart from that, I'll see you next time.